Hi, Year 11. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mr. Lloyd. I am currently looking after Key Stage 5 English in the English department. And I just want to talk to you very briefly today about studying English at Post 16 and our Post 16 Centre. I know, obviously, some of you will love English language and literature and you can't wait to further your study. I know that some of you are thinking about other subjects, potentially at A-level, particularly if you're veering towards a more scientific route, and might be thinking about potentially studying English as an extra option for university and beyond for the skills it gives you. And I also know there's some people who, your English journey may well end with your last exam, which will be language paper 2. So I appreciate we've got a bit of everything there. To those people in that kind of latter category who are potentially not thinking of doing an English beyond GCSE, please just listen for the next 10-15 minutes with an open mind, because it may well be you actually do better than you thought in English. You may get a higher grade than one of your options. It may well change your options. And also there may well be people in your classroom who haven't made their mind up what they want to do yet. So this might help them with a bit of information. And it's designed to complement. We know not everyone could make it to open evening. So a bit more information following on from open evening where you had a chance to have a look around and look at some of the things we do. So the first A-level that we study is A-level English language. This is a standalone A-level. It's very, very different from what we study at GCSE. It's really important to note that. Sometimes GCSE can be quite restrictive. You all have to do English language. The government want you to get your pass in English language. But inevitably, it's paper 1, question 1, paper 1, question 2, 3, 4, 5, paper 2, question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So within the kind of process of GCSE, it does get a bit narrow in its focus. It can be quite repetitive in terms of what we teach there as well. Language A-level is completely different. It builds on the skills, it builds on the things that you do, but you look at how language is used in the wider world. You look at how, for instance, people use language in different regions. So how, as a plastic Scouser, I would speak differently to someone from Barnsley, from Sheffield, from London. You look at how language choice and kind of the words people use and accent and dialect start to affect the way people behave. So why do newsreaders and politicians start dropping their T's and speaking differently? You look across gender. So we look historically at how there's been a gap between the way men and women speak. And is it just the case that men and women speak differently? Or is it the case that there is actually an inherent deficit in the way that men and women speak? And you look at different studies from kind of scientists who've looked into spoken conversation between men and women, and obviously going forward into society, we look at the increasing kind of movement towards gender fluency and how job titles are changing. So when I was young, for instance, you'd have a policeman and you'd have a female policeman, but they'd be a policeman. And now, of course, we know that's long. We have a police officer. We don't necessarily live in a binary society anymore, and language moves to change that. You look at age as well. When I text my dad, God love his soul, he's 70, he will respond with a thumbs up emoji or the word okay. He's 70, that's just what he does. I don't know if it's partly to do with being a dad as well, if it's kind of gendered there as well. So you look at age and how that affects the way people use language. You look at occupation, so jobs. You look at job titles, as I've mentioned. You look at social groups. You also look at how are children born with the ability to acquire language, or do they get that through their environment and their nurture? It's a fascinating subject. In terms of assessment, you do 2 exams. They're 2 hours, 30 minutes. Most A-level exams are longer than GCSE exams, although your GCSE Lit Paper 2 is 2 hours, 15 minutes, so not much longer. And you do 2 pieces of coursework, a language investigation. You pick an area potentially linked to one of the ones I've mentioned earlier, and you study an element of that. And you produce an original writing piece. So you look at a style model, an existing piece of writing, and you produce some writing based on that. English language is for me. You need to be interested in the ways people communicate in society. It's quite a dynamic and fun A-level to teach. It's enjoyable. You do need to know linguistic terminology quite well. So you need to know what nouns and verbs and adverbs are. There's quite a lot of terminology, and it's quite an important part of the course, which builds on obviously the terminology you use at GCSE. But it's really important. You need that basis there. Otherwise you might find it a bit tough. Debate and discussion. Some of the things I've said while I've been reading, from the slide and looking at kind of aspects of gender, that might have got your back up a little bit. You know, this idea, what? There's a difference between the way men and women speak. What's he talking about? And that's part of you evaluating source material that's gone before and engaging in that debate and having that discussion. There's some other A levels it works quite well with. Psychology, sociology, it works reasonably well with, because obviously we look at studies by some of the theorists in those subjects. It works well with literature. You can study English language as one A level, and you can study literature as a second A level. So you can that might be your two A levels there as well, and that's absolutely fine. And we do have combined as well, which is one A level that mixes the two. And it's quite good for careers, obviously, in journalism, PR, in advertising and marketing, basically careers where you need to manipulate language and use language on a daily basis to meet the needs of an audience there as well. In terms of, if you've got any questions about English language, obviously you can come and ask me. You can ask Miss Mann, Miss Fernley, Miss Marrow, Miss Flintoft as well, as our kind of current teachers of A-level language, and I'm sure they will be able to give you kind of further advice about that as well if you've got any more questions. A-level literature, very, very similar in terms of, obviously it builds on the skills you've got from GCSE. I'm going to skip through this because obviously you've kind of, you know, because you do GCSE literature, the similarities. The only difference is, obviously, for literature, you really, really need to enjoy reading. First question, do you have a passion for reading? If you don't enjoy reading, please, you know, think perhaps about picking literature, because you will find it difficult. Not only reading the texts themselves, which we do at GCSE, so you know, we're reading and annotating Macbeth at the moment, but also you will need to be reading around that. So you'll need to be reading about what people have said about Macbeth. Lots and lots of people get paid lots and lots of money to write about these texts, and you need to look at that. And we also study elements of performance of these texts. The texts we study at A level, and this is another thing to consider if you're thinking about literature, we study Othello, we study unseen poetry, pre-1900 anthology of poetry from AQA and Wuthering Heights. And on paper 2, we study feminine gospels, unseen prose, A Streetcar Named Desire, and The Handmaid's Tale. So really, you can be starting to have a look at those texts if you're thinking about literature and thinking about, do I enjoy those texts? Which one would I find challenging? You know, you can ask us for some more information about them as well. And you do a piece of coursework, you compare two texts across theme. It's 2 hours, 2 exams at the end, one 3 hour, one 2 hour, 30 minutes. Very, very similar to those you're going on to university. That's the kind of length of exam you'll see there for the subjects you might be thinking about doing. It works well with language, it works well with history, sociology, psychology, government and politics, because quite often we find there's a bit of crossover with those subjects and the characters or themes we study. It's great for some of the more academic careers, but for any career, of course. Law, for instance, my undergraduate degree is in law. I did English literature as one of my A levels because as a subject, universities don't necessarily like A-level law. They have to unpick some of the law you get taught there as well, because you get taught it to a certain standard. And obviously what they would like is you to have a subject where you practice analysing language in depth, doing wider reading in depth, developing your skills of reading and analysis for a career where you study lots and lots of cases and lots of statutory law. You do lots of reading and you analyse language. You know, there are barristers up and down the country who are arguing in courts about the meanings of words, and that comes from English. So it's great for law. It's a highly valued course at universities. They all are, language, literature combined. You know, it's not fair to single one out there as well. But we tend to find students pick literature as a kind of a challenging course. It is a challenging course, but it does have, it brings those kind of potential opportunities there as well. So if you're thinking about literature, you can ask myself, Mr. Wood, Mr. Jenkins and Miss Breslin, and we'd be more than happy to give you some information about the course. Just think though, you do need to enjoy reading, and you also need to kind of enjoy reading those texts that we are going to study there as well. And the final one is literature and language combined, language and literature combined. This gives you the best of both worlds. We find that some students do pick both language and literature. Some students pick one or the other in terms of what they want to do. We also find that some students who can't really choose between them, but they quite enjoy both of them. Text choices for this differ to A-level literature. So they don't have Shakespeare and they don't have older texts, for want of a phrase. So they have John Donne poetry is probably the furthest back you'll go, really. Handmaid's Tale, Great Gatsby and A Streetcar Named Desire are relatively modern texts there that you're studying, and they're not necessarily easier, but they're a little bit more straightforward to understand. And you still do your analysis to the same standard on those texts as well. Also here, what you will study is a Paris anthology, an anthology of non-fiction texts, so very similar to Language Paper 2 at GCSE, linked around the theme of Paris. And when you're studying those literature texts, you tend to do it with more of a focus of language and elements of language and how that's used as well. And what you also do is a bit of creative writing using one of the set texts. So it's quite good for those students who are keen to develop their writing skills, which you do in A-level language. Very, very similar to literature and language in terms of subjects it complements, but also in terms of other areas and where it might take you there as well. It goes well with sociology, psychology, it goes well with language and law and languages, because obviously you're doing similar elements. And obviously the similar kind of career paths of journalism and PR, creative writing, it does have more of a focus on creative writing, but similar subjects, law, publishing, teaching. So in terms of questions there, you can come and ask myself any questions, or Miss Flintoff and Miss Atkinson as well. So I'm sorry to take up your time, but I just wanted to go through some of the options there as well. Obviously, you know, thank you to those people who've listened. If you do have any questions, just ask your teacher and they'll send you in my direction, or to any of the teachers I've mentioned here who teach the course. They'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. I will also be teaching the EPQ next year, which is separate to English, which is a qualification worth half an A-level in an independent study area of your choice. So it'd be lovely to see as many of you as possible applying for one of our courses, whether that's English, one of our Englishes, or the EPQ. But again, please ask any questions. I can make this PowerPoint available to your teachers if they want to kind of share it with you on Teams. And as you're going through the application process, just ask us and we're more than happy to help out. Thank you for your time. I know not everyone's thinking of doing English, but it would be lovely to see as many of you as possible study and stay with us next year. And again, just ask if there's anything you're not sure about.